You can always tell when someone thinks they're doing you a favor by pushing you aside. That kind of polished corporate dismissal, wrapped in a smile and handed to you like a participation trophy. That was Carl Bennett, Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Stratacor Solutions. The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just slid my laptop away from me like I was some intern interrupting a board meeting and said, "We'll handle the Falcon presentation. You're not quite senior enough for this one, Jason." The way he said my name, it curled at the edges with condescension. That half smile on his face, the kind that says he thinks he's being generous while stealing the very thing you built, made something twist inside me. For 5 months, I'd lived inside that presentation. 5 months of skipped weekends, cold dinners, and one unforgettable week working through the worst flu of my life with a trash can by my desk. I had pulled that proposal out of raw, chaotic system data like a sculptor revealing a form inside stone. And now, they were walking into the room with it under their arms, without me. Carl and Amanda, his ever-agreeable sidekick, headed toward the glass conference room at the end of the hall, carrying my slides, my projections, my strategy. Not a single word of acknowledgement. They hadn't even changed the footer on the slides. My initials, JM, still sat in the bottom right corner of every page, mute evidence of a truth they wanted buried. I didn't follow them. I sat back in my chair, hands on the edge of my desk, trying to steady my breathing. My name is Jason Miller. I'm 38 years old, and up until that moment, I thought I had a grip on how the corporate world worked. Deliver results, work hard, prove your value, get noticed. Turns out, the rules are different when you're not one of them. I came to Stratacor Solutions 2 years ago after a decade in infrastructure optimization. Not exactly cocktail party material, but essential stuff, the kind of work that quietly saves companies millions. I left a stable position back in Ohio to move to Austin because Stratacor claimed to value expertise over titles. They wanted disruptors, innovators, people who could dig into systems and spot what others missed. That was me, or so I thought. When no one told me, what the shiny recruitment posters don't say is that at a certain level, it's not about what you know. It's about who knows you. Carl played golf with our CEO. He wore custom shirts with his initials embroidered on the cuff and laughed too loudly at meetings. He was polished, photogenic, and completely out of his depth when it came to anything technical. But that never seemed to matter. The Falcon Systems account wasn't just another opportunity. It was the opportunity. The kind of contract that didn't just pad numbers. It changed the trajectory of a firm. $8.2 million on the line. We've been chasing Falcon for years, never getting past the initial pitch. That is, until I found the flaw. It was buried deep, an inefficiency so subtle it took someone who knew what anomalies to look for. I found it buried in transaction logs and process queues. A mismatch in automated system checks causing cascading latency and costing Falcon $3.4 million annually. I brought it to Rachel Kim, my direct supervisor. "This is sharp work," she told me, her eyes lighting up behind those round glasses. "We'll develop this together." Rachel was one of the few in leadership who didn't treat me like background noise. She climbed the ladder the hard way. She knew what it meant to be underestimated. For months, we crafted a response so tailored, so meticulously engineered, it could only have come from someone who truly understood Falcon's infrastructure. I missed my niece's school recital. I canceled a long overdue fishing trip with my dad. I designed a phased rollout plan that would overhaul Falcon's system with zero downtime. I even modeled future savings over a 36-month cycle, factoring in inflation and projected growth. This wasn't just technical. It was visionary. And when we got the call that Falcon's executive board wanted a full in-person presentation, including their CTO, Angela Watkins, I was certain I'd be at the table. Instead, I watched them walk away with my future under their arms, leaving me behind like a ghost. But ghosts, I was about to learn, have their own kind of power. That morning, I didn't go back to work. Not really. I sat at my desk, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen, while the glass walls of the conference room turned into a silent stage. I could see Carl gesturing grandly, Amanda nodding along like a trained chorus, and the Falcon executives, men and women in tailored suits, watching with practiced skepticism. I could almost hear Carl trying to explain infrastructure he didn't understand with words he barely grasped. And right there, in the quiet hum of Stratacor's open-plan floor, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even resentment. It was clarity. I had known they wouldn't let me in that room. I'd felt it building for weeks. The casual exclusion, the "we'll circle back to you," the strategy calls I wasn't invited to. But I hadn't just accepted it. I had prepared for it. 3 nights ago, after the final draft of the presentation was completed, after I was told to trust the process and support from the bench, I made a decision. I removed the algorithm. The most critical component of our solution, the proprietary encryption logic that prevented real-time data corruption during phased implementation. It wasn't in the slides. It wasn't in the documentation. It lived only in my head. I justified it at first as a security precaution. Protecting intellectual property, I told myself. Not smart to give everything away in one shot. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was my failsafe. My name was missing from the slides. My voice wasn't invited to the room. But my absence was about to become deafening. 30 minutes into the presentation, I saw it happen. Angela Watkins, Falcon CTO, leaned forward. Her expression had shifted from polite interest to something sharper, confusion, then concern. She tapped on something in the portfolio, said something to Amanda, then turned to Carl. Carl's confident posture deflated just slightly. Amanda began flipping through printed pages in a quiet panic. Then all at once, every head in the room turned toward the glass. Toward me. My phone buzzed. Conference room. Now. Rachel. I stood slowly. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding like a war drum. The floor had fallen quiet, eyes peeking over monitors. I wasn't sure what they thought they were witnessing, but they knew something had cracked. The 30 feet to that conference room felt like walking across a courtroom. I straightened my blazer, adjusted my watch. As I stepped in, Carl greeted me like a janitor interrupting a royal banquet. "Jason is one of our analysts," he said. "He helped compile some of the data." "Some?" Angela didn't blink. She turned to me directly. "Mr. Miller, your colleagues seem unable to articulate the mechanism that protects our transition phase from data corruption. According to this, it's custom tiered encryption with adaptive layering. But there's no formula, no schema, nothing. Without that, this proposal is theoretical." She looked me in the eye. "Does the solution actually exist?" I took the seat across from her, my seat. Not a corner, not a shadow. Front and center. "Yes," I said. "It exists. It just isn't in the slides because it's too complex to be simplified into a static document. It's a 9-step protocol designed to integrate directly with your infrastructure's current handshake protocol. It uses real-time diagnostics to create flexible encryption tiers, ensuring stability during migration." Angela raised an eyebrow. "You designed this?" "Yes. I built the solution you're reviewing today, from the audit that discovered the flaw to the roadmap you've been pitched. All of it." The room fell into absolute silence. Carl opened his mouth, but Angela raised a hand, firm and final. "Then I want to hear it from him." For the next 20 minutes, I talked. I explained the structure. I mapped the flows on the whiteboard. I fielded every technical question they could throw, and each answer was mine. Not memorized, not rehearsed, lived. I saw it in their faces: relief, interest, respect. Carl couldn't keep up. Amanda looked ready to sink into her chair. Rachel sat quietly, her expression unreadable. And when I finished, Angela leaned back. "Well," she said, "that makes things considerably clearer." Then she turned to Carl and asked the question that would change everything. "Why wasn't Mr. Miller in this room from the beginning?" Carl fumbled. "We typically have senior leadership handle these kinds of presentations. We find." Angela cut him off with the precision of a scalpel. "In my experience, the people who build the solution are the ones who should explain it." Then she looked back at me. "If we move forward with Stratacore, Mr. Miller, would you be the implementation lead?" Carl opened his mouth. I didn't wait. "That would be my expectation," I said. Angela nodded. "Good. I don't work with figureheads. I work with engineers who understand what they're building." And with that, she stood, extended her hand to me, not Carl, not Amanda, and said, "Let's talk soon." As she and the Falcon team exited, the entire room seemed to collapse into stillness. That's when I knew the missing piece wasn't the algorithm. It was me. And now, I was exactly where I belonged. The moment the door shut behind Angela and the Falcon team, the oxygen in the room seemed to thin. I was left alone with Carl and Rachel, the aftermath of my appearance spreading like gunpowder smoke. No one said a word. Not at first. Carl's jaw twitched. The color in his face had shifted from corporate tan to blotchy red. Rachel stared at the table, her fingers laced together as if praying for a different outcome. What the hell was that? Carl hissed finally. I looked at him, calm but unflinching. That was me saving a $8.2 million contract. He slammed his palm down on the table hard enough to rattle the pins. You deliberately withheld critical information. You ambushed us in front of a client. No, I replied. I made a judgment call. I protected the one part of the proposal that actually made it work because I wasn't given a seat at the table. Would you have preferred I let you crash and burn in there? Carl was shaking with fury. You think you're clever? You think this little stunt makes you look good? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I think it made us look competent. Or at least, it stopped us from looking incompetent. If I hadn't stepped in, Falcon would have walked. Rachel finally spoke, and her voice stung more than Carl's yelling. Jason, you should have told me about the algorithm. We could have prepared. Prepared how? I asked. Would you have presented it yourselves again? Or would you have finally let me in the room because you realized you couldn't wing it without me? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. We both knew the answer. I gathered my things and turned to leave, but Carl stepped into my path. This isn't over, Miller. Not by a long shot. I met his eyes and didn't blink. You're right about that. When I returned to my desk, the air was thick with whispers. Heads turned as I walked past. No one knew exactly what had gone down, but the glass walls of that room had been enough. Something had shifted, and everyone could feel it. I sat down, and within minutes, my screen lit up. Subject: Conduct Review, 4:30 p.m. today. Location: Executive Conference Room. Attendees: CEO, HR, Jason Miller, Carl Bennett, Rachel Kim. 3 hours. That's how long it took Carl to mobilize against me. I wasn't surprised. Wounded egos move fast when they feel threatened. And Carl, he wasn't used to being questioned, let alone exposed. But I wasn't the same man who had been passed over that morning. I wasn't walking into that meeting defenseless. I spent those 3 hours gathering everything. Emails showing my contributions. Drafts with tracked changes in my name. Meeting summaries where I presented key updates. I printed copies, saved digital backups, even emailed the package to my personal account. I wasn't going in to argue. I was going in to state facts. At 4:28 p.m., I walked into the executive boardroom with a file in my hand and fire in my chest. Inside sat Martin Lang, CEO and founder of Stratacor, a man known for two things: building this company from his garage and not suffering fools. Carl was already there, his face tight. Rachel looked pale. Vanessa from HR sat at the end of the table, flipping through a folder like it contained live explosives. Jason, Martin said, gesturing to the chair across from him. We need to discuss what happened with Falcon. Before I could speak, Carl launched in. He sabotaged us, Martin. He deliberately withheld key information. He waited until we were in front of Falcon's board to grandstand and make us look like amateurs. It's insubordination. It's cause for termination. Martin turned to me. Is that true? I placed the file calmly in front of him. What's true is that I spent 5 months building the Falcon proposal. What's true is that 3 days ago, I was told I wasn't senior enough to present my own work. What's true is that the algorithm in question is complex, and I made a judgment call. It needed to be explained in person. Carl opened his mouth, but Martin raised his hand. Let him finish. I opened the folder and spread the documents across the table. Here are the emails showing my technical findings, my implementation draft, my risk assessments. Here are internal communications where I briefed both Carl and Rachel on progress. None of the core solution came from them. They couldn't explain it today because they didn't create it. Rachel looked away. Vanessa looked like she wanted to disappear. Martin stayed quiet, studying the papers. Finally, he asked, why didn't you include the algorithm in the materials? The room went quiet again. I met his gaze. Because if I did, you would have never known what happened today. Because after months of being dismissed, I needed something undeniable. A line that couldn't be crossed without confronting the truth. I took a risk, and it paid off for all of us. Car was practically vibrating. She admits it. She admits to manipulating the presentation. That's grounds for immediate termination. Martin didn't even look at him. Instead, he turned to Vanessa. Has Falcon reached out since the meeting? Vanessa nodded. Yes. Angela Watkins emailed directly. She was very impressed, especially with Mr. Miller's technical explanation. She specifically requested Jason be the lead on all further implementation. No exceptions. Carl's mouth opened, then closed again. Martin turned to me. So Falcon wants you. They trust you. Can you deliver? Absolutely. He nodded slowly, thoughtful. Then here's what's going to happen. You're going to lead the Falcon project. You'll report directly to me. If you deliver, if this implementation goes the way Falcon believes it will, we'll have a different conversation about your role here. And just like that, the room shifted again. I nodded. Understood. As I stood to leave, Martin added one last question. The algorithm, is it documented now? I smiled. It will be by tomorrow morning. Good, he said. Because while I admire strategy, I don't want to be held hostage again. Don't make me vulnerable. No need, I said. I just wanted to be heard. Now that I am, I don't need leverage. I have results. And this time, no one could take them away. The next morning, the office felt different. Not louder. Not brighter. Just heavier. Like everyone was waiting for the ground to shift again. I got in early. Not out of obligation, but habit. Years of being the guy who carried the weight without recognition had trained me well. But this time, something had changed. I wasn't walking in with my head down anymore. As I settled into my desk, I saw them watching. Not openly. No one said anything. But glances held longer than usual. Conversations dipped into whispers as I passed. I wasn't the underdog anymore. I was the guy who'd flipped the table and walked out with the contract in his hands. That kind of shift doesn't go unnoticed in corporate America. And with that shift came silence. Carl didn't speak to me. Not once. He avoided eye contact in meetings, stopped showing up at lunch, and began delegating to his direct reports whenever we crossed paths. The man who once paraded the floor with artificial charisma had vanished into closed-door calls and urgent offsites. Rachel tried. She stopped by my desk that Thursday morning, 2 coffees in hand. One of them my usual. Hey, she said, setting the cup down. Thought you could use the caffeine. You've had a hell of a week. I nodded, accepting the drink without much warmth. I want you to know, she continued, I try to push for you to be in that room. I stared at my screen, then slowly turned toward her. But not hard enough, I said. She blinked, then sighed. It's complicated, Jason. No, I replied. It's simple. You knew I built that solution. You knew Carl didn't understand it. And you let him go in there anyway. Her mouth tightened. I had to pick my battles. I leaned back in my chair. Maybe one day, someone junior on your team will be fighting a battle like this. I hope you fight a little harder for them than you did for me. She didn't respond. She just nodded and left the coffee there like an apology. It sat untouched. The only person who treated me the same was Raj. Raj from the development team. Quiet, sharp, underrated. He walked by my desk the day after the meeting, slid into the empty chair next to me, and said, about time someone called their bluff. He tapped my monitor and smirked. You need help fleshing out the Falcon specs? I'm in. In that moment, I knew exactly who I wanted on my team. That week, Raj and I worked late, outlining technical phases, defining protocol trees, optimizing resource allocation. I documented everything thoroughly this time. No more unwritten rules. No more trusting that good work would speak for itself. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was building something. Then a week after the infamous presentation, my phone rang. Not a Teams notification. Not an internal ping. An actual call. The ID said, Angela Watkins, Falcon Systems. I took a breath, then answered. Ms. Watkins. Jason, she replied, her voice steady and direct. I've reviewed your follow-up documentation. It's sharp. Very sharp. Thank you, I said. I've tried to be thorough. Good. Then I'll be direct, she said. Falcon is prepared to move forward with Stratacore. But we have conditions. My grip on the phone tightened. I'm listening. First, you will be the designated project lead. Not internally, not in name only. It must be in our contract. You'll be the official technical point of contact. I nodded. Understood. Second, she continued, we want quarterly technical reviews with you. No middle management. Direct access. Agreed. And third, she paused for just a moment. We want the right to take you with us if we're dissatisfied with how StraightaCore supports this project. My breath caught. You mean hire me directly? If it comes to that, yes, she said. To be blunt, we believe in the solution, but only because we believe in you. You've shown us that. We don't want to risk losing what we're investing in. If your company fumbles, we want the option to bring you in as a consultant to continue the work. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. This wasn't just a backup plan. This was leverage. This was a parachute. That's unusual, I said carefully. So is your insight, she replied. I've worked with vendors for over 20 years. Most of them send polished talkers and hope we don't ask hard questions. You were the first to answer with substance. That's rare, Jason, and rare things are worth protecting. We ended the call with a mutual understanding. I didn't need the escape hatch, but knowing it was there changed everything. After the call, I sat at my desk for a long time. Then I opened a blank email, addressed it to Martin Lang. Subject, Falcon conditions and strategic implications. I didn't apologize. I didn't editorialize. I simply listed the conditions, attached the formal notes, and asked how he wanted to proceed. The reply came in 27 minutes. My office, 3 p.m. Bring everything. And just like that, the next phase began. Martin Lang wasn't alone when I walked into his office at 3 p.m. Sitting across from him, in a gray tailored suit and a sharp stare that said she didn't come for small talk, was Marcia Winters, StraightaCore's legal counsel. She didn't stand when I entered. Didn't smile either. I knew instantly this wouldn't be a congratulatory meeting. Jason. Martin gestured to the seat across from him. Sit down. I did, setting my folder on the table. Inside, the Falcon terms, my original algorithm documentation, and a personal note detailing how I intended to implement everything step by step. Martin nodded toward Marcia. She has some concerns. Marcia opened the Falcon agreement and tapped the clause that had triggered alarm bells. This, she said, this language gives Falcon the right to poach you mid-contract. That's not just irregular, it's dangerous. It sets a precedent we can't afford. I met her eyes. Dangerous for who? She blinked. For StraightaCore. Martin leaned forward, watching us both. For StraightaCore, Marcia repeated. If clients realize our value is tied to individuals, not the institution, we'll lose negotiating power. I nodded slowly. So the risk isn't that I leave. It's that they now know who's actually doing the work. Neither of them responded. That silence said everything. I looked directly at Martin. What Falcon sees, what you should see, is that I didn't just build a solution. I built trust. They want continuity. They want assurance that the person who gave them answers won't suddenly disappear behind layers of bureaucracy. Martin folded his hands. And what are you asking for, Jason? I paused. Not because I wasn't sure, but because I wanted the words to land. I want you to accept Falcon's terms. All of them, including the clause. And in return, I want a formal recognition of what I bring to this company. A promotion, a new title, authority to lead, not just on Falcon, but on any future client who values my approach. Marcia's lips tightened. That's a big ask. I opened my folder and slid a one-page summary across the table. This is the projected ROI on the Falcon implementation. 7% above forecast. $8.2 million today. Long-term impact? Easily double that once Falcon starts referring us. This isn't just about me. It's about where this company is headed. Martin studied the page, then me. You're asking for title. Yes. You're asking for autonomy. Yes. You're asking for compensation. I'm asking for fairness. Recognition tied to value. Marcia looked like she wanted to object again, but Martin raised a hand. And if we say no, then Falcon still moves forward for now. But you risk losing them. Not today, not next month, but eventually. And you send a message to every silent contributor here that being good at your job only gets you so far. The room went quiet again. Then Martin leaned back and said, "Let's talk terms." What followed was 2 hours of the most intense negotiation of my life. Every bullet point was questioned, every clause debated. But I held my ground, not out of arrogance, but out of certainty. I had finally stopped playing by the old rules. And for the first time, I was sitting at the table not as a guest, but as an equal. By the end, we had a deal. I would be formally promoted to Director of Technical Strategy. I would lead the Falcon implementation, report directly to Martin, and have direct access to client accounts that demanded senior technical involvement. I would also receive a performance bonus, tied not just to Falcon's contract value, but to client satisfaction and successful delivery. When Marcia raised concerns about setting dangerous precedent, Martin surprised us both. Then maybe it's time we set one. We can't keep bleeding talent because we're afraid to acknowledge who actually moves this company forward. He looked at me. "You've earned this. Now make sure it sticks." I stood, shook his hand, and left the room with my future rewritten. In 2 weeks, I had gone from being erased to rewriting the rules of how this company measured worth. And I wasn't done yet. Monday morning came with an announcement. Martin called an all-hands meeting, one of those rare events where the entire office packed into the main conference room like students waiting for final grades. I stood near the back, not because I had to, but because I wanted to see it unfold from the same perspective I used to hold, the invisible zone. Martin stepped up front, flanked by HR and 2 other executives. He didn't speak with fanfare or flourish. He just cleared his throat and said, "I'm pleased to announce that Stratacor has officially secured the Falcon Systems contract, valued at $8.2 million. Applause broke out instantly, but then he raised a hand. And I'd also like to acknowledge the architect of that solution, someone who exemplified technical leadership, strategic insight, and integrity when it mattered most." He looked toward me. "Jason Miller has been promoted to Director of Technical Strategy and will lead the Falcon implementation project moving forward." Silence followed for a beat too long. Then came the clapping. It started slowly, then grew louder. Some of it was genuine. Some of it was polite obligation. And some, I could tell, was pure shock. I glanced at Carl across the room. His jaw was tight, his arms folded, a man swallowing glass in the shape of his own ego. Rachel clapped with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. After the meeting, as the crowd dispersed, Carl finally approached me for the first time since our confrontation. "Congratulations," he said, the words sticking to his tongue like glue. "Quite the coup you pulled off." I turned toward him calmly. "It wasn't a coup, Carl. It was a correction." He stepped in closer, lowering his voice. "Don't get too comfortable. This company has a long memory." I held his gaze just long enough. "So do I," I said. "And unlike some people, I document everything, including this conversation." His face twitched, slight but unmistakable. "I'm reviewing all ongoing projects this week," I added. "Part of my new role. We'll be taking a closer look at attribution and credit." Carl took a half step back, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "This isn't over," he muttered. "You're right about that," I replied. "It's just beginning." That afternoon, I did something I've been planning since the day Falcon chose me. I started assembling a new team, not from the usual shortlist of favorites or ladder climbers. I went to the shadows, the overlooked, the quiet minds who did the heavy lifting while others took the credit. People like Raj. He didn't even hesitate. "I'm in," he said before I finished the sentence. And he wasn't alone. By the end of the week, I'd built a unit of 4, myself, Raj, and 2 other analysts, Sabrina and Eli, both sharp as blades, both fed up with being used as tools for someone else's win. We weren't flashy. We didn't spend time posturing. We worked directly with clients. No gatekeepers. No filtering. No figureheads. 6 weeks into the Falcon implementation, Angela Watkins called me personally to say, "This is the smoothest rollout we've ever had. Your team delivers exactly what you promised, and more." Hearing her say, "your team," still felt surreal. Because for the first time, I wasn't surviving a system. I was building a new one. Carl, meanwhile, was quietly reassigned to a strategic initiatives role. Everyone knew it was a demotion in disguise. He attended fewer meetings, sat further from the center, and smiled less each day. No one said it out loud, but the balance of power had shifted. Rachel tried to stay close. Coffee invitations. Occasional compliments in front of others. But I kept things professional. Civil, distant. Some bridges don't burn. They dissolve. As for me, I had changed too. I spoke louder in meetings, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. I gave credit publicly and made sure my team's names were on every slide, every document, every client-facing file. I refused to let what happened to me happen to anyone under my wing. I mentored junior analysts, especially the quiet ones, the ones who never raised their hands but always stayed late. I told them what no one told me. Don't wait to be seen. Speak. Document. Own your value. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone who had ever been in my shoes, pushed to the sidelines while someone else smiled for the camera. Because now I was the one holding the lens. It started with a knock on my office door. I'd only been in my new corner office for a month, and it still didn't feel like it belonged to me. The title plate read Director of Technical Strategy, but I still caught myself reaching for the light switch like I was just visiting. I hadn't decorated much, just a small photo of my niece on my desk and a whiteboard scribbled with Falcon implementation timelines. Jason, my assistant, called. Martin needs to see you. Now. I grabbed my notebook and headed down the hall. I knew the walk well. It was the same path I'd taken the day of the conduct review. Only this time, my badge didn't feel like a visitor's pass. Martin was at his desk, and next to him, on the table, were 2 manila folders. Contracts. He didn't waste time. 2 companies reached out directly to me in the past 48 hours, he said. Both heard about the Falcon rollout. Both want to work with us. I nodded, not surprised. Angela Watkins had mentioned referrals were coming. What kind of scope are we looking at? I asked. He tapped the folders. Combined? Around $12 million. I raised an eyebrow. Already. They want your team, he said bluntly. Specifically, not Stratacore Solution. Jason Miller's team. They want to meet the people behind the Falcon success story, not the figureheads. He leaned forward. And if we're being honest, you are the story. It was flattering. But it was also complicated, because now I wasn't just an asset, I was leverage. And I knew what that meant in corporate terms. The same system that had once ignored me was now circling to make sure it never lost me again. Martin studied me carefully. I have to ask, Jason, you satisfied? I tilted my head. You asking as a CEO? Or as someone wondering if I'm about to jump ship? He smiled faintly. Little of both. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the window and looked out over the city skyline. The glass reflected something back at me. Not the same man who had been told he wasn't senior enough. Not the guy who sat outside that glass-walled conference room like a ghost waiting to be summoned. I'm not looking to leave, I said finally. But I'm done playing quiet. Martin nodded. Good. But I wasn't done. Angela gave me an out. You know that, right? That clause in the Falcon contract wasn't just about leverage. It was a parachute. He said nothing, but his jaw tightened slightly. I didn't use it, I continued, because I wanted to change this place. I wanted to prove that we don't have to bury talent in our politics to keep things running. Martin leaned back. You've made your point. No, I said. Not yet. I opened my notebook and handed him a single-page proposal. It wasn't about me this time. It was about a new structure, formal technical mentorship for junior staff, direct attribution tracking on all proposals, and quarterly review sessions where team leads nominate contributors for internal spotlights. A system where credit wasn't assumed, but documented. He read it carefully, then looked up. You really think this changes things? I don't think, I said. I know, because if we don't change it, the next Jason Miller won't stay quiet either. And they shouldn't have to go through what I did just to be heard. Martin didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, all right, let's test it with your team first. If it works, we scale it. That was enough. I left the room with a quiet kind of victory pulsing in my chest. Not a triumphant roar, but a steady heartbeat that said, this is how it starts. Later that week, Angela called again. Jason, she said, you're making waves. I've had 2 CTOs ask for your contact info. You good with that? Sure, I said, as long as they're calling Stratacore. She laughed. For now. The truth was, I didn't need to leave anymore. because I was no longer fighting for a seat at someone else's table. I was building my own, and others had already started pulling up chairs. Change doesn't always begin with revolutions. Sometimes it starts quietly, in hallway conversations, in the way people sit at the table, or in the silence that used to follow someone's idea but now ends in "tell me more." It was a Tuesday when I first noticed it. I was walking past the break room when I overheard one of the newer analysts, Liz Tran, presenting an idea to her team lead. Her voice was soft, hesitant. I paused. "Look," her manager interrupted. "It's a good thought, but let's keep the presentation high level. Don't worry about the technical deep dive. Jason's team handles that." I stepped in before I even realized I was doing it. "Actually," I said, "I'd like to see Liz's technical notes." Her manager blinked, surprised. Liz looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her. "I'm reviewing client integration prototypes this week," I added. "If she spotted something, I want to hear it." The next day, Liz was in my office, visibly nervous, holding a binder that was way too organized for a junior analyst. "I didn't mean to overstep," she said quickly. "You didn't," I said. "You stepped exactly where you were supposed to. The problem is, this place forgot how to make room." I gave her the whiteboard and let her walk me through her logic. 10 minutes in, I knew two things. One, her solution had serious potential. And two, she'd never have gotten past her manager without someone like me pulling her up. By Friday, she was prototyping directly with Raj. That same week, I sent out an internal memo to all department heads. Every proposal moving forward will include a detailed contributor list, by name, not title. Technical staff are required in all client meetings that involve their work. No exceptions. I knew I was pushing boundaries, but I also knew boundaries were the problem in the first place. To my surprise, I didn't get much pushback, because people had seen what happened with Falcon. They'd seen what happened when silence broke and truth stepped forward. It wasn't just a rumor anymore, it was policy. Carl, of course, stayed quiet. His special projects role became something of an office joke. A folder passed around with no real authority. Every few weeks, he tried to reassert himself in meetings, only to be sidelined by facts he couldn't answer or workflows he never understood. Eventually, he stopped trying. Rachel, meanwhile, treaded water somewhere between guilt and survival. She apologized a few more times, always with the same half-excuse of, "You know how things were." I nodded. I let her speak. But I didn't forget, because culture isn't what's written on company walls. It's how people behave when no one's watching, and who they protect when the stakes get high. So I started something small, a Friday roundtable. Just me, my team, and anyone else in the company who wanted to join. No titles, no agendas, just a space to talk through real problems, share early ideas, and give feedback without politics clouding the air. At first, it was just 4 of us, then 8. Then we needed a bigger room. I didn't expect it to matter as much as it did, but it became something rare, genuine. One Friday, a junior engineer named Omar presented a visual mapping tool he'd been working on in his spare time. Angela from Falcon happened to be visiting that day and sat in. By Monday, we had a request from Falcon to incorporate Omar's tool into the next review cycle. And just like that, another name found its place in the spotlight. We weren't just a team anymore. We were a movement, a quiet one, but growing. People started talking in halls again, not in whispers, in brainstorming. You could feel the shift, not in volume, but in energy. A culture that used to reward politics was beginning to reward performance. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I knew it wouldn't last unless we made it last. So I documented everything. Every credit, every contributor, every win tied to a name and a face. Because I remembered what it felt like to be erased. And I promised myself, no one under my leadership would ever feel that again. 6 months after the Falcon launch, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Jason Miller? The voice on the other end was crisp, confident, American, but with a cadence that came from years of talking to boardrooms. "This is Adam Carlisle. I'm the COO at Novantech." I knew the name. Novantech was a giant, multinational, one of the few companies whose infrastructure blueprints were studied in graduate-level textbooks. If Falcon put Stratacore on the map, Novantech was the map. "We've been watching your work," Adam said. especially how you led the Falcon integration. Angela Watkins speaks highly of you. Thank you, I replied, cautious but curious. We'd like to fly you out to San Francisco for a conversation. Not about consulting, about something bigger. That last line landed differently. Something bigger. 2 days later, I was sitting in a corner office on the 42nd floor of a building that overlooked the Bay Bridge. Across from me sat not just Adam, but the CEO of Novantech, Claudia Monroe. She was direct, sharp-eyed, and didn't waste time. We don't just want you, she said. We want what you're building. The model you've created, empowered technical teams, attribution-based leadership, transparency in development pipelines. It's the future, and we want you to lead it. She laid out an offer. A new division within Novantech, built from the ground up. Autonomy, budget, full authority to build a team of my choosing. A vision not handed to me but mine to shape. And the salary? More than double what I was making now, with equity and a signing bonus that nearly made me forget how to breathe. You wouldn't be reporting to anyone but me, Claudia added. And we wouldn't be asking you to adapt to our system. We'd be adapting to yours. I left the building that day with my hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, from possibility. Back in Austin, I sat on my apartment balcony, staring out at the city lights. Same view as 6 months ago, but everything looked different. Stratacor had become my proving ground. The place where I clawed back my name from the edge of invisibility. Where I'd taken a broken system and cracked it open, just enough to let light in. But I knew the truth. Cracks don't fix a foundation. And no matter how far I climbed here, I'd always be cleaning up after people like Carl. Always fighting inertia. I met with Martin the next morning. He read the situation before I opened my mouth. Novantech, he said, leaning back. I nodded. He exhaled slowly. I figured something was coming. They're offering me more than a role, I said. They're offering me a platform. He didn't argue. Didn't try to outbid. Instead, he said, I can't stop you. And frankly, I wouldn't. You've outgrown what we can give you here. I appreciated the honesty, the maturity of it. But I do have one request, he added. Name it. Build something better. And when you do, make sure the next guy like you doesn't have to fight this hard to be heard. I shook his hand. It wasn't bitter. It was passing the baton. In the weeks that followed, I wrapped up Falcon's final integration phase. I handed off my role with full documentation, trained my successor, and scheduled personal one-on-ones with every team member I'd mentored. When I told Raj, he didn't look surprised. He just said, wherever you're going, save me a seat. I smiled. Always. On my last day, I cleaned out my office slowly. Not because I was nostalgic, but because I wanted to leave it better than I found it. I left behind a whiteboard, wiped clean, but with one message in permanent marker. Give credit. Build trust. Speak up. 6 months into my new role at Novantech, I stood in a glass-walled room that overlooked an entirely different skyline. The Golden Gate Bridge shimmered in the distance, the bay reflecting the early morning light. And across from me sat 20 young engineers, fresh minds, big dreams, and a few nervous glances like they were still trying to prove they belonged. I smiled, because I saw myself in every one of them. I've been asked to speak, not as an executive, not even as a director. Just as Jason Miller, the guy who once sat on the outside of a boardroom while his life's work was paraded around without credit. So I told him the truth. I told him how 5 months of grinding work could be erased with one meeting invite you never receive. I told him how a single algorithm, held back for the right moment, can become your voice when no one is listening. I told them that sometimes courage doesn't feel like standing tall. It feels like sitting down, calmly, at a table where no one left you a chair and saying, actually, I built this. And I watched their faces change, not just from interest, but from recognition. Because every one of them had already felt it. The invisible weight, the skipped recognition, the silent reshuffling of credit. And in that moment, I realized something deeper. It was never just about my promotion. It wasn't about proving Carl wrong, or even about landing Falcon. It was about what happens when one voice, just one, says no more. Because the truth has gravity. It pulls people with it. It forces change. And the moment you stop waiting for permission to speak is the moment you realize that power was always yours. I ended that talk not with advice, but with a challenge. Every system can be changed, I said, but not if everyone waits for someone else to do it. If you're overlooked, document everything. If you're silenced, speak anyway. If you're told to wait your turn, ask why. Then decide whether that turn is worth waiting for. And if you ever find yourself sitting outside the room where decisions are being made, remember, you're not powerless. You're a disruptor, a builder, a breaker of old rules. Because one voice, clear, consistent, and armed with truth, is sometimes all it takes. That night, I found myself back on my balcony, different city but the same ritual. I pulled Angela Watkins' old business card from my wallet. The one she gave me the day the Falcon meeting almost crumbled. I never used it, never needed the exit, but I kept it because it reminded me of the day I stopped accepting the unacceptable and built something better instead. Now, as I sat there, no longer fighting to be noticed, but creating space for others, I realized something even more powerful. The best revenge? It wasn't watching Carl squirm. It wasn't the title, the raise, or even the respect. It was this, becoming the leader I once needed. If you're still reading, let me ask you something. Have you ever been erased? Overlooked? Silenced? Then let me tell you this. You don't need to burn bridges to change a world. You just need to build your own. And when you do, others will follow. Not because you demanded a seat, but because you show them how to build one. Have you ever been in Jason's shoes? Pushed aside, silenced, watching someone else take credit for the work you bled for? You're not alone. But more importantly, you're not powerless. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever wanted to speak up, stand up, or rewrite the rules in your own world, then do one simple thing. Comment below. Tell us your story. Because the moment you share it, the moment you say this happened to me too, you start taking your power back. Drop a comment. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their worth. Subscribe for more real stories of courage, resilience, and quiet revolution.